Blessings, timeless truth seekers, welcome to the Amica Archive. This is one of two parts of our first episode titled The Last Historian. The truth fact of the day is, did you know as of this year, 2051, over 80% of our historical information is controlled by the Force worldwide? And as we know, control either means truth or lies depending on who is in charge. At the Amica Archive, what is erased and forgotten, we will restore.
Disclaimer. This content is produced by humans and voiced by AI. The cadence, tone, and pace may seem artificial, but the truth in the message is both authentic and profound. Thank you for the benefit of your full attention. Enjoy.
It's late winter of 2051. Heavy clouds loom overhead, and thunder rumbles faintly as a storm approaches. Amica P. Lynch, a doctoral student at UC Berkeley, walks briskly across campus as the first drops of rain begin to fall. She's on her way to meet with her academic advisor to finalize the topic of her thesis. The chill in the air mirrors the weight she feels inside. Exhaustion clings to her, but she knows she must push through. Her work carries a significance she's only beginning to grasp. Now seated outside Professor Bell's office, she reviews her notes.
30% done.
The rhythmic pounding of the downpour against the window filling the quiet hallway.
My thesis is ahead of schedule, and it's going to change everything. The history of Black intellectuals and Black resilience throughout various points, post-Reconstruction through 2020 to 2051. It all connects. Breaking illusions, telling truths. That's the title. This isn't just research, it's a revolution in the making.
She tells herself this to stay motivated, but a creeping doubt whispers at the edges of her mind.
Is it enough? Will it matter? Dr. Bell's gonna love this, right? He will. He has to.
The chill in the air mirrors the weight she feels inside. Exhaustion clings to her, but she knows she must push through. Her work carries a significance she's only beginning to grasp. This meeting will determine the direction of her thesis, and perhaps much more.
Miss Lynch, how is everything? Take a seat.
I'm doing okay. I feel much better now. I don't know why I was so nervous.
So let's take a look and see what you have.
Amica settles into the leather chair, her shoulders relaxing slightly as Professor Bell skims through her proposal. The room is quiet, the hum of a desk lamp mingling with the faint thunder outside. Shelves packed with books tower around her, a reminder of the countless hours she spent piecing her research together.
Amica, this is thorough, almost obsessive, but that's a compliment.
Obsessive? Try necessary. Look, this is about Reconstruction's aftermath. No one talks about how Black intellectuals were thriving, or how so many former slaves walked off plantations and straight into classrooms. Did you know there were Black professors teaching at white colleges in the 1870s? It's almost like we were rewriting the script on what was possible in higher education. And then the script got erased.
Erased by whom, do you think?
By everyone. The institutions, the economy, and the so-called white allies who backed away when it wasn't politically convenient. This isn't just about history, Professor.
Amica's voice grows stronger, her passion infusing every word. She leans forward, gesturing as if willing Professor Bell to grasp the urgency of her work. Outside, the storm grows louder, the rain tapping against the window in a steady rhythm that underscores her words.
You just mentioned the so-called white allies, yet you cite allyship as a core point in your argument. You might want to clarify the difference between performative allyship and those whose contributions were essential.
My example of Mary White Ovington speaks to this clearly. This is why her story is so important.
This is what sets Amica apart. Her brilliance was extraordinary. She had a unique way of seeing patterns, details buried in history that others dismissed. It was almost savant-like in its precision. Professor Bell respected her for that. He loved to challenge her. Iron sharpens iron.
You're presenting an interesting perspective, but without the proper context, you're walking a fine line, Amica. If you're going to frame it this way, you need to strengthen your argument, because a point like this, from this angle, will be met with scrutiny.
I know, but I'm up for the challenge. We have to consider this. Here was a highly educated white woman, a descendant of abolitionists. But it wasn't until she read about the 1908 Springfield race riot that something shifted. At 38 years old, she was forced, for the first time, to fully see the reality of Black oppression, because it spoke to her not as an abstract issue of race, but as a failure of humanity. And she chose to act. She made a deliberate choice to be on the right side of history. That moment of awakening led her to co-found the NAACP. And not just in name, she organized it, built it, led it, working alongside Black leaders in a biracial environment that helped shape one of the most impactful civil rights organizations in history.
Amica, you're right to a certain extent, but you have to dig deeper.
Professor Bell wouldn't admit it outright, but he had looked forward to reviewing her work. In the early stages of her research, she had already outshined scholars with decades of experience. There had been heated debates about her theories with his colleagues, whispers that she was reshaping the field in ways that even seasoned historians hadn't considered. She continues,
But think about this. NAACP ended 7 years ago. Its records, its victories, its very legacy erased. The erasure of any proof that Black and white leaders fought together, that biracial movements worked, that Black progress was tied to the nation's progress.
Mary White Ovington could have lived a life of comfort. Born into privilege, she could have conformed to the prejudices of her time. Instead, she threw herself into the most difficult social problem in America, the Negro question. She did so with full awareness, despite her modest disclaimers to the contrary, of the scorn, insult, and even physical danger her fight for Black freedom would bring down upon her. And yet, she marched on, not just for Black American liberation, but to save white America's soul. Amica continues her point. She wasn't done.
This is important history just gone, poof, without a trace.
Mrs. Ovington was firm, unapologetic, and timeless. She famously wrote,
If we deny full expression to a race, if we restrict its education, stifle its intellectual and aesthetic impulses, we make it impossible to fairly gauge its ability.
She also said,
Segregation is not just about separation, it is about power. Legalized discrimination means that oppression is no longer an opinion. It becomes law.
Mary White Ovington documented everything. Her books, her articles, her reports in the Crisis magazine. She made sure this history was preserved. Her unwavering commitment exemplified the impact of true allyship.
Amica's points were valid.
It's about understanding these cycles. Black progress, white backlash. If we don't confront these patterns, we're doomed to keep repeating it.
Amica, stop for a moment.
The professor's expression shifts, his brows furrowing. He sets the papers down and leans back, studying her intently. The desk lamp casts shadows across his face, making his seriousness all the more striking.
What's wrong? Did I miss something in the research?
No, your research is flawless. That's why I need to tell you something that hasn't been made public yet.
Amica's confidence gives way to unease. Her hands tighten on the chair as her mind races. The professor's grave tone and his hesitance to meet her gaze send a chill through her.
Okay, what's going on?
You will be the last person awarded a PhD in history.
For a moment, Amica doesn't respond. The weight of his words hangs in the air, pressing down on her like the storm clouds outside. Thunder rolls again, louder this time, amplifying the magnitude of what she's just heard, as the clock bell chimes at 3 o'clock.
The last? What do you mean, the last? Like, no more historians at all?
Funding is gone. Priorities are shifting. The field is being phased out. These decisions come from above, from institutions, let's just say, organizations with priorities, far removed from the pursuit of truth.
Priorities far removed from truth? You mean just more lies and control?
You could say that. There are organizations who decide what's worth preserving, what's worth telling, and who gets to tell
And
it.
you're just okay with this? Letting them decide whose stories in history matter and whose don't?
Of course not. But Amica, this is why your work matters so much. If you're the last, you have a responsibility to make it
A
count.
legacy? Right, sure. This is a lot of pressure to put on one person.
The weight of the professor's words settled heavily on Amica's shoulders. She could feel her breath quicken, her thoughts racing. How could one person bear the burden of preserving history? The realization felt suffocating, like the room itself was closing in on her.
Thanks for the heads up, Professor, but I think I need a minute. I need to get some air.
Amica's chest tightens as she steps into the hallway. The air feels heavier, her vision slightly blurred. Her mind races as the onset of a panic attack begins to creep in, but she doesn't recognize it. She's never had one before.
Take deep breaths. Just take deep breaths.
She presses her back against the cold, tiled wall, desperate for stability. Her palms rest flat against the surface, as if grounding herself in the chill might stave off the rising storm within. The professor's words echo in her mind, relentless and sharp.
You will be the last historian.
Her throat tightens, and her eyes sting with the threat of tears as she mutters to herself.
What does that even mean?
The hallway feels endless, the storm outside roaring louder, as if the Divine Mother and nature are both urging her to confront and accept the gravity of what she's just been told.
Amica Archive will return shortly after a brief word from our sponsors.
Next time on the Amica Archive.
Maybe this isn't just about Black history. Maybe it's bigger. If they can erase Black stories, they can erase others, too. This feels like an attack on truth itself.
Deploy all resources. We need him, alive, if possible.
And if he resists?
Do whatever it takes.
As the storm rages on both sides of the world, one truth emerges. The threads connecting two fates are uncertain, but the cost of uncovering the truth may be higher than either of them ever imagined. Stay tuned next week, Monday, for part 2 of episode 1, titled The Last Historian.
For the latest updates and exclusive content, go to www.gott-love-paz.com. You can follow us at the Amica Archive on YouTube and social media.